criticism! Last episode, I talked about anger and why it's such a lucrative business here on YouTube. Now, I want to talk to you about the other big moneymaker, and that's criticism. Man, do we love our critics, right? I'm one, he's one, she's one, I bet your grandma's one. It takes zero effort to become a critic and start amassing that sweet, sweet following of people who listen to your every word and await your new videos with bated breath. But what happens when a critic messes up? What happens when the scales fall from the eyes of the critic's hangers-on and you can no longer see them the way you used to? What happens when a critic deserves criticism? Well, let's explore that today, shall we? We're going to talk about a critic's critics. From an early age, we're taught to listen to authority. Be it the government, our teachers, parents, priests, bosses, moderators, whoever. We're taught that trusting authority is one of the most important facets to life, should we not want to live squatting in a forest living off of fish bones and deer spleens. This implicit trust we affect to those in charge is so ingrained into our collective consciousness that we often turn blind eyes to the bad actors within our communities for fear of being seen as a rabble-rouser. And yes, this applies to criticism too. In recent years, we've built up an extremely unhealthy admiration of the critics and personalities who occupy our online spaces. Because they present themselves as characters in an easily accessible format, echoing the sentiments that many of us already feel or can be coaxed to feel, we put all of our weight and trust in these individuals and their various online personae. After all, a person who thinks this movie or video game is stinky poo-poo can't possibly be a scummy person, right? They told me what I want to hear, so I trust them. And if I disagree with them or challenge their points of view in any way, they'll never love me, and the people who haven't strayed from their paths will hate me. Yeah, guess who else employs that type of psychology? Cults.
Oh, fuck.
Ooh, scary, right? Nobody likes being associated with something labeled as a cult, but that's where we are now, unfortunately. Welcome to the cult of criticism. You can leave your brain at the door and your tithings in the hole in the corner. But don't worry, we really appreciate your support. Unless you stop giving us money and attention, of course, in which case you don't deserve our guiding voices and lights. This is a textbook example of cult psychology, and in being afraid to call people out, or being willfully ignorant of their actions, we're letting potentially scummy actors have free reign. Now, does that mean every person has to be a virgin saint of the purest blood to be a critic? No, because that's directly counter to human nature. That's not the point here. The point is that there's a phrase that summates my point very succinctly, and that phrase is... Have you ever watched that show Intervention, with all those self-destructive drug addicts and alcoholics ruining their lives for our entertainment? If you've seen it, you've probably thought, wow, how could those people let themselves go? How could things get so bad? The thing is, on that show, we're only seeing the part of their lives when someone decided to put their foot down and say no. What we don't see is the months or years of time where people said, you do you. You do you is, in my opinion, a skin-crawlingly awful phrase, and its usage is almost never as intended. You see, the phrase you do you is meant to have positive connotations, in that you should just do what you want and not worry about what others might think of you. You know, the whole just be yourself, haters gonna hate thing. Noble intentions indeed, but we all know that the path to hell is paved in vintage Beatles vinyl record jackets. Just kidding, it's good intentions. Lately though, the phrase you do you is being used to excuse any behavior, good or bad, for fear of hurting someone's feelings. In short, it's being used as nothing more than a method of enabling. Sure, you may not want to step in and stop someone's tirades or drug addiction or totally appropriate clothed human being fun times because it's none of your business. Yes, people have a right to do what they want with themselves. But it being none of your business, if you let them do you, you may be handing them the very tools to their own destruction. To put it another way, you see a gun in someone's hand. You may not be pulling the trigger, but you're giving them the clearance to do so. After all, what they do with themselves is none of your business, right? They should just do themselves, no biggie. Yes, biggie. It is biggie. It is biggier than I think a lot of people realize. And it's biggie because these people count on that. They count on being enabled, to not be questioned, and to just be trusted that they know what's best for themselves and everyone around them so they can keep digging themselves deeper into their pits.
I think that there are fucking rapists and Nazis out there who, even though they are rapists and fucking Nazis, they are more redeemable than you because at least they're doing something they fucking believe in.
So here's the question. Should we enable people to continue a downward spiral simply because we don't want to intrude on their lives? Is it right what they're doing simply because they're doing it? I guess the bigger question would be, would you trust a cult leader to do right by their followers? Before moving on, I want to address the other side of the coin. The critics and online personalities who manipulate their audiences into doing their bidding and spreading their thoughts around the internet. Now, obviously, not every person who is a critic or online personality engages in this behavior, so don't think that this is a blanket statement. After all, a critic's job is to share their opinions, so that isn't the issue. The issue comes in when these people cannot take the same criticism that they dish out, that everything they say is correct and true, they milk their audience for all the goodwill and money they can, and when they pit their supporters against people who question them like a medieval king ordering his troops to take the neighboring fort. This behavior is compounded by sites like Twitter and Instagram, the former of which favors the most glib and condensed line of reasoning to be easily digested and vomited out to a larger audience, and the latter favors intense levels of vanity and vapid validation. These sites, combined with their appearance as trustworthy figures, creates a foul cocktail of narcissistic egos covering one another's butts against scrutiny that more often leads to obsessive micro-communities popping up devoted entirely to these people who provide much of the money to fuel their online careers. And frankly, that makes me rather sick. I've said it before and I'll say it again, but nothing on earth is immune to criticism, and that includes your favorite online personality. How far do these people's heads have to be up their own poop chutes to believe that they are above criticism, and that they have the right to treat their audiences like the scum between their toes? Without an audience to spread their influence and jerk off their egos, these people are just that. People, no more significant than you or I, because anybody can be a critic, but it takes a certain type of people to think that they are better than everyone else simply because they are a critic. And these people, regardless of who they are, need to be held accountable for their actions and words. There's no law against being an idiot, but there's also no law against calling out idiots, and you're much more powerful than they think you are. Well, that's because of... Listen, it's easy to think that online personalities and critics are always in the right, that they know what they're doing all the time, and that it's okay to trust them. We don't want to think of the people we like as bad people, and it always comes out as a shock when it turns out that the people we admire might be idiots, weirdos, or criminals. Usually, at this point, their audience will split. Some will double down on their convictions that everyone against the person they like is wrong and a hater, whereas some might take to doggedly pursuing everything that person does to try and document their fall from grace. The thing I don't understand here, and I mean this sincerely, but when exactly did it become necessary to pledge our hearts, minds, and assets to a person on the internet who says things about stuff? Let me tell you right now, holding people accountable for their words and actions is not a bad thing, especially if the person in question is repeating their destructive behavior. And anyone who tries to refute your ability to criticize or question them is not worthy of your trust, because it shows that these people are afraid of their audiences. It comes down to the point where you have to consider who is really more powerful here. The one person who says things on the internet, or the thousands upon thousands of people who put their trust in them and carry out their will. We saw this come to a head in 2016 with all that intoxicating YouTube drama. YouTubers pitting their enormous audiences at one another in vicious flame wars that ultimately amounted to very little, all because one guy said, "Oh, this guy did some bad thing, go destroy him!" And like obedient attack dogs, the fans went and scorched the land as they traveled. Scores upon scores of them, all acting on one person's words. This is the reason why wretched things such as cancel culture and headline slacktivism are as ubiquitous as they are now. Bandwagoning has always been a problem on the internet, but with the rise of online personalities and critics, bandwagoning has become the terminal illness of any social media platform. The problem here is that people don't seem to realize just how powerful a collective can be when advocating for or against a single person's point of view. You, as a person, have a lot more power than you realize. And you know what Uncle Ben says about power, right? Just as us online personalities are responsible for ensuring our supporters support us for the right reasons, supporters are responsible for making sure that the people they support aren't setting themselves on a path towards destruction. And turning a blind eye to bad actors helps nobody. It only encourages more bad behavior to propagate. So be critical of the critics. If they hate you for it, they're not worth your time. Obviously, a definitive and conclusive solution to this problem isn't really feasible, considering human nature and all that. However, the one thing I can say is this. Remember that you don't have to form an opinion right away about everything. Don't believe something just because someone you like said it, and you don't have to listen to or respect anyone who tries to weaponize your support of them. You're not an attack dog, a sheep, or a mindless cash sponge. You're a human being with a brain built for critical thinking. So, when the critics need criticism, make sure you do your job. And remember, the EyeofSol sees it all. But what do you think?